and welcome. So we're really excited today. We've got a great interview for you, and I'm just going to introduce Ros Saunders. So she's actually got decades of direct experience and many years coaching clients. Her specialty is in identification, treatment, and healing of codependence and relationship addiction. Ros is an accredited NLP practitioner with a diploma in counselling. She's now an author of a compelling and practical guide, Emotional Sobriety, Finding Raw Courage to Heal Your Codependence. Rosalind shares her wisdom, practical tools for navigating the road through codependence to emotional sobriety. So welcome, Rosalind.
Thanks, Katie. I'm happy to be here. Thank you for asking.
I'm happy you're here too. It's great. So I guess I'll kick off with the first question. So how does addiction relate to weight loss?
Great, thanks. Great question. Well, all addiction is, we all can go into addiction as a result of not managing our emotions. And we know that weight loss, it comes into addiction. Let me say, like, bulimia is addiction, anorexia is addiction, emotional eating is addiction, and underneath that is usually the inability to manage our emotions.
Right. Yep, that makes sense. And so you work in the field of codependency. Would you explain how that could be a contributing factor to actual weight loss, I guess, and weight gain? You know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thanks, Katie, I have clients on both sides of the spectrum. I have people that lose a lot of weight, and I've done that in my own life when I've been very, very low and suicidal. I, couldn't eat, couldn't even keep water down. And that was due to my own codependency. I have people also coming to me, they come to me and say their weight has ballooned out. So they're seeing their addiction, they're walking around with it, they can't deny it.
Oh, wow.
Underneath this is, and I say to them when they come, yes, the weight is, that's what draws them to come. I've tried every diet, I've yo-yo dieted, I've gone on everything. But usually underneath that is their codependency is in not valuing themselves, not taking the time to taking care of themselves, especially in women where they're doing, and mothers, where they're doing everything for everybody else. And they're exhausted at the end of the day, they're just shot. So of course, if there's a piece of cake in the fridge or a whole cake, it's like you've got no bandwidth left, and the cycle goes round and round.
Wow. And so you just mentioned before, I'm just going to backtrack a little bit. You said you've suffered from addiction. Do you want to share a little bit about your story and how you kind of got involved with it and, your experience?
So, but I've come from a family of addiction. I shifted from New Zealand 31 years ago, nearly 32 actually, over to Brisbane. So I was born into addiction. Both my parents were addicts. So I was soaking it in. I was marinating in it, if you like.
Wow.
Of course, my father was dead at 47 with alcoholism. My mother had a stroke, and they both smoked between 60 to 80 each cigarettes a day.
Oh, wow.
Smoking, and then of course my father drank to cope with the with my father's drinking and the rows. That I just want to add in there, they were both very enterprising, intelligent business people.
Oh, wow.
So to cope, I can understand why, as you'll see when I further a little bit with my story, is to cope with the drinking. My mother went to the doctor, and in those days, her doctor gave her Valium.
Oh, wow.
She started swallowing the Valium, and smoking. And I remember we lived in a small town, and of course everybody knew everybody. So the chemist, she'd drive down the road, she'd be driving, there'll be ash on the end of her cigarette, she'd be driving, I'd get out the passenger side with the little brown bottle, run it into the chemist, who we knew very well. He'd fill up the brown bottle, and then back in the car and off we'd go. That would happen very regularly, like every few days.
Oh, wow.
Now, she couldn't, and she was about 5 stone. I don't know how many kilos that is, but 2, she couldn't hold the weight because of what was going on inside of her emotions.
Wow.
So she wasn't coping with someone else's addiction, so we go to our own addictions. So, but a little bit, so when I was 18, I think, I met a young guy, and I then married him, and of course he was an alcoholic, because that's what I marinated in. That was normal to me.
Right.
And I was used to that emotion. We actually pick people, or we draw people to us from our emotions, from our frequency, which is much more widely acknowledged nowadays. So, so I married an alcoholic and kept the cycle going. Then that went on, and we were having problems in our marriage. So then I wasn't eating. I was doing the same thing as my mother did, you see, to cope with the drinking. And I couldn't cope with myself. So I would go on and off antidepressants and things in those earlier days, because I didn't know what else to do. Then we shifted to Australia, which I then knew. I thought if we came over here, we'd get our family together. That's what my husband wanted. And it would get my sick thinking, my codependent thinking thought, if I get him away from the rugby club and the boys and all of that sort of thing that came before us as a family, then we could get our family together. And it was about a week when we got over here, he'd found a pub down the road, and just all I did was I shifted all of my own codependency. It came with me on the plane.
Wow.
Check luggage, and that's what's known in the 12-step groups as a geographical. So you're shifting geographically, but you're taking all your stuff, because it's all inside of us emotionally.
Right.
So that went on, and then for the next 10 years, I don't know, I started going to a 12-step group, Al-Anon, for families of drinkers and stuff. Sometimes I'd have to go to those meetings 3 times a day just to function. And I couldn't eat. You wouldn't think so now looking at me, but I couldn't eat, or I was sick to the backbone. But it was my addiction to my husband, relationship addiction. He was my drug. He was addicted to the drinking, but I was addicted to him. So over the next 10 years, we separated and went back together 5 times. It was probably a bit more, but 5 is embarrassing enough. Like that. Separate, then the pain of withdrawal. This is where the relationship addiction comes in. The pain of withdrawal was no different from a heroin addict, and I would go back and try to make it work again and again and again. Just like a heroin addict tries to get off and then they go back for another fix. Wow. So I wasn't using substances, alcohol or pills at this stage, but I got to my deathbed with my own addictions.
Wow, that's amazing. Go on.
No. Go on. So then, of course, in that time, my children were becoming teenagers. So they were marinating in this frequency and household of addiction again. And so for the last 20 to 25 years, 3 of my now adult children have battled with severe addictions: heroin, ice, prisons, rehab, psych wards, open heart surgeries. So it just keeps going on and on and on. And I class obesity or overweight as usually food addiction. That's probably where I think this comes into your talk.
Well, it's amazing, like when you're talking about that story and you said you kept going back and you're addicted to the relationship, even though you knew it was bad. It makes me think of a couple of things. One is that this is not an uncommon situation going on. In fact, probably most women have been affected by being in a relationship, or even men as well, being in a relationship that is no good for them. And as a result of it being no good and having that codependency, that obviously affects their emotions, that also affects their health and their eating. And whether it be weight loss or weight gain, either could happen. Yeah, amazing. Your daughters have been taking some products with very good results, and they've suffered from addiction. Would you like to share a bit about this?
Yes, I'd love to. Thank you. So for 25 years, I really haven't seen much of my 3 children because I will support them 110% towards getting well, but not 1% to feed the addiction, as in no enabling, etc. And it's a tough gig when you've got children in addiction. 1's enough, 3's even tougher. So when I first became aware of the age pill and started taking it, I loved the way it made me feel. And we were just listening to Marsha saying it makes her feel happier and So I then bought some for my girls. So that's about both my daughters who live here on the Gold Coast. That's about a year ago. They were taking 12 a day. And they are now making quite significant steps in their recovery. One's got out of a very abusive relationship. One of them also has stopped alcohol. Another one just last week, my daughter Bridget, who's 40, she texted me and said she's off all antidepressants and she's been on them since she was 16. So you see how she started taking the antidepressants like I did and my mother did? See how it's progressive and it's generational? So she had a week off, off all her antidepressants. Now, I believe there's a big chunk of that is to do with the brain chemistry, and the B's and the niacin and the H pill. Wow,
fantastic. And do you see obesity as addiction in most cases? Do you see obesity as addiction in most cases? Can you elaborate a bit on it?
I do. I can't blanket that statement. I have a very dear friend and a colleague, Dr. Gary Leong. So he's a pediatric endocrinologist. And his passion is obesity and diabetes. We have talks and we're going to be doing talks together, and he's just written his book as well. And, I'd say to him, Gary, it's food addiction. The definition of addiction is when we continue to do something despite the negative consequences in our life, like me with relationship, or people continue to eat and stuff their emotions down when they know the guilt and the shame, and when they get on the scales the next week, and we continue to do it. So I have some very good talks with Gary about that, and he agrees. And he, in his clinics, because he's a pediatric endocrinologist and deals in childhood obesity, he gets some of the children coming in, and the mother comes in, and you can see it straight away. And in a lot of cases, the grandmother comes in, as well as, eating learned behaviors.
Yeah.
So we pick it up by a frequency in our home. We see what they do, and we just start doing it.
Yeah.
And I believe that obesity is eating. In a lot of cases, they say that 6% of obesity is genetic. The rest is epigenetic, environmental. So it's stuffing down. I've done it myself. Feeling a bit low, so I go and have a coffee and a cake, a big cake, and I feel sick, and or eating. Another sort of a term that's come to mind for me, which is volume addiction.
Yeah. Can you tell us about that?
So volume addiction, and I would class myself in that. Like, I like to eat, and if it's something I like, I can't have a cake of chocolate in the fridge and just have two squares every night. It just won't happen. So I don't have it in the fridge, or I don't bake, because I'll eat the whole lot. That's together with a bit of sugar addiction, once I have one. So volume addiction is another thing that's where people are eating far, far too much. And that gives them, they feel ghastly, they feel bloated, and then the cycle, then their addictive thinking comes in, which we're addicted, the guilt, the shame, they hate themselves. As soon as they start that, if food is, or if on the other spectrum, as soon as if they get on the scales and they've lost too much weight, we've separated from ourselves.
Right. Yeah, amazing.
We've separated, so we can't be there, or like we're not within ourselves. The guilt, the shame, the disgust in a lot of places. One of my daughters also has had about 20 years of severe bulimia. See, it all goes together. Wow. And it's not one thing or another. And I actually went to the film last night, Rocket Man, Elton John's film, and I loved, because it was all based around a group therapy in a rehab. And that's my thing is, whatever the addiction is, if you don't heal the codependency underneath it as to why you're doing it, all we'll do is cross-addict. Right. Or from this one to this one, or you notice, so years ago, people would give up alcohol, but they'd start eating ice cream and things because the sugar sets off the same receptors.
But, you know, people say that also who are smokers, and then they're very fearful of giving up. And in fact, I've heard many people say they don't want to give up because they'll then eat more food and gain weight.
So
and that
great example of cross addiction. And if I can just go back to Elton John last night, so it starts without giving too much away. He's in group therapy, and he says, I'm an alcoholic. Oh, and I'm bulimic. Oh, and I'm a shopaholic. Oh, and I'm a sex addict. Like you know, it's not just one thing, and it doesn't matter which one it is. It's all self-hatred and not valuing ourselves. And a lot of that can come from trauma in our early childhoods.
Yeah. Wow.
But if we don't stop you can say, well, I want to get well, but if you don't stop the substance and not cross addict, then you're never going to be able to go down to the feelings and emotions that we may have shut off in our earlier years, which is what we're trying to get it from an alcohol or an ice cream, or we're trying to feel good.
Yeah,
and
basically.
And then we want more and more and more, and it takes more and more heroin, or it doesn't have the same effect. Our tolerance for the opiates, look at the opiate addiction. Our tolerance goes up higher and higher and higher.
Yeah.
So that's where I think addiction fits. I think food, obesity, and there's food addiction is epidemic. And my friend who you've had on here, Monica, the Swedish, she's the #1 food addiction qualified person in the whole of Australia. We're addicted, not just the food, we're addicted to the carbs, we're addicted to, and the fast food and things, because it gives us a hit, but then we don't feel full, so we need more and more and more.
Yeah.
I've done that years ago. I've been to McDonald's, and an hour later I'm hungry again.
Yeah, they do. They actually even design the food like that too. They design it to shrink in the stomach, and they also put chemicals in the food to stimulate the appetite. So they purposely create their food so that when you finish taking that bite, those chemicals they've added in make you want to go and buy another one straight away.
Yes, and I think I heard from you when I listened to your webinar about that they coat the chips in sugar to make them brown. Did you say that?
That was Dr. Kurt, yeah. Dr. Kurt.
Someone said that. You know, so you see, it's feeding all of those things that we get a short-term fix with.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So I've got another comment here. So addiction to sugar as a gateway drug at an early age. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I'd love to, thank you. So when I was younger, my mother would bake, and we had a lot of sugar in the house, etc. I'm not blaming it all onto that, because alcohol's sugar for a start, isn't it? So we had that. Addiction is, so if we feed our children a lot of sugar as a reward, good girl, here's a lolly, you know, and there's lollies, like it's everywhere out there, isn't it? All the lines at the supermarket the kids are going through, then they start to see that as in their pleasure center as that's what fills them instead of filling themselves. And that can set off. Monica's son is a great example of that. He always liked the carbs and the pasta and the sugars. Then he started, so then when they get to say about 12, 13, they start on alcohol or marijuana. See how it just progresses. And it's feeding the same centers in the brain. So sugar, feeding sugar to babies. I think there's a huge amount of sugar even in the milk powder, the tins of milk powder.
Yeah, I'd say there would be.
That my point for that is we're setting them up. They want a bit more and a bit more and a bit more. And once they get to teenagers, it's all out there for them. So they might, like in my children's case, they started on marijuana, and then it just got more and more because of the unrest in the environment in the house, and because of them not feeling good.
Yeah,
that's where I think that with the food, the sugar is highly, highly addictive. Well, we know it's more addictive than cocaine.
Yeah, they've shown that with mice where they had the water laced with cocaine and then the water laced with sugar, and all the mice went back to the sugar water versus the water with like cocaine. I think one mouse out of like 19 or 20 went to the cocaine and 19 went to the sugar.
Yes, yeah. So all of those things, and also may I add in here, whether it's food or whatever it is, whatever addiction, when people come to me, it doesn't really matter to me which the addiction is. You know, we have to keep an eye on that, but we have to go underneath the addiction. What was I going to say about that? I've forgotten. I've lost my train of thought. I'll have to come back to that. I've lost
That's okay.
what I was going to say.
Okay, so yeah, we'll come back to that in a second. So you can, and being on the yo-yo dieting, you've already touched on this, but the thing is, with that sort of dieting, you gain more weight than you do after the
cycle of addiction again, is it not?
Yeah.
And I remembered what I was going to say before. I've been doing a lot of work in the neuroscience, and I've just had a whole week up at the Sunshine Coast with Dr. Joe Dispenza, neuroscience, neurocardiology, neuroendocrinology, all of this sort of stuff. So you have, let's say with this, you have the cake that you didn't want to have, so you've let yourself down. We become addicted to the shame, to the guilt, we become addicted to those emotions. So when we're not doing it, that starts screaming out as well. Right. So can you see how the addictions layer?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm sure you know people that are addicted to drama, addicted to busyness. They're busy, I do this, and they wear a little badge. I used to, badge on there. I'm a busy person, I'm a martyr, addicted to all that. That gives us juice.
Yeah. It's amazing.
When we stop it, when we try to settle these down or go off the sugar or reduce it or whatever, those emotions we are very addicted to the emotions. By the time we're 35, they are locked in our autonomic nervous system. And they want to be fed. They don't want to be. So they will draw you to eat the cake, to go on another diet so that you can feed the emotions. Very important.
Yeah. It's just so key to someone's health, isn't it? Your emotional state, emotional management, and that the ability to cope with anything.
And I call it emotional sobriety. Now people would think, oh well, I'm not a drunk lying in the gutter with a brown paper bag. The dictionary says sobriety is of sober mind. So emotional sobriety of a sober mind in all areas of our life. Because this doesn't. Let's take someone that's a food addict. That affects their finances, and they will go and spend money, just like an alcoholic, on food that they can't afford.
Yeah, and then they'll spend more money trying to
all intertwined. So that's why my book is called Emotional Sobriety, because if we can get a balance and help with our emotions, we're not quite looking for those quick fixes, and we can then slow down. The number one thing, we're all addicted to the fastness of life, and that was my hardest thing, because I was a busy person and I loved it. I got juice from it. You know what? I got juice from that, running hairdressing salons, 4 children. Oh, Rosalind, I don't know how you do it. That fed me, because I was so empty inside that I was wanting people to do that. So I'd keep working to get that praise. Addicted to that.
Wow. Yeah, it's amazing. When someone starts to reflect and think about it, nobody's exempt from having, some sort of codependency or addiction. It's just whether. So what would you say about that? It's more about if it's in balance or being aware of it, being aware how to manage it. So what do you offer advice in that regard?
Well, I think if you're joyful in your life, if you're enjoying your life, that doesn't mean we don't have challenges. We need both challenge and support for us to evolve. But if you're joyful in your life, if you enjoy, I really think it's you enjoy your life. I enjoy my life. It's not because my children are sober, they're not really after, but I'm very grateful. If you're feeling those emotions, you don't need to get it from the outside quite so much. Then you can go and enjoy a meal or a cake and a coffee with a friend. But you're not, it's the motive from which you're doing it. You're not going there to stuff a cake down to then feel sick, or some people go home and throw it up.
Yeah.
What did you ask me? What would I say? Yes, I think we're a very addictive society, and just getting awareness and then getting support. I call it scaffolding. Get scaffolding around us to have support. Go and find someone that understands codependency, because my belief is it underpins all of the other addictions.
Wow.
And that's why I do this work, because I couldn't find anybody that understood codependency.
No, it's not really. In fact, aside from hearing it from yourself, I was listening to an interview with a talk actually with Jeffrey Combs, and he actually talked about it in his talk and even recommended a book on codependency and told everyone they need to read it because he said it's actually the cause of everyone's financial problems.
I've heard Jeffrey Combs, and I've read his books. He used to come to the conventions that we, it's all the time. Usually if you go under, it's codependency and addiction. Everything if I don't watch the news, but if you hear of some crisis or you know, you don't have to go too many layers, and there's definitely codependency, whether it's relationship addiction, substance abuse addiction, or all of that stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And so, Rosalind, you actually offer counselling or coaching. Do you want to share a little bit, just in case somebody's watching this call, they recognise they do have an issue and they need perhaps some help with it? Do you want to tell people a little bit about your coaching services and how you can support and assist someone with their challenges?
Okay, I'd love to. Thank you. So because I couldn't get the help I needed and it took me so long to recover, I wish I'd have had me 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I didn't, and we know that that's how you have your journey. I now do private coaching with codependency, so people could contact me. You have my contact details, or I have a website, rosalindsaunders.com. And we could connect, and I do coaching via Skype, so I do it Australia, New Zealand. I've got one person in America at the moment because of technology nowadays. We can do that, and they could just have a chat. And often what they come to me with, there's a whole lot of stuff underneath it. So that's what I do coaching. I'm looking at becoming more visible and doing more stuff you know, with that, running some online programs. But the most thing is to get honest, at least with awareness and honesty. This is where I'm at, might not be what I want to look at, but then you can start, because most people out there are floating down that river called denial.
Yeah, it's a long river.
I don't want to. So, and because a lot of these stuff, these codependencies or addictions or food, or it's normalized in society. And food's not illegal, is it? We need to eat. So there's plenty of excuses and justifications around that.
Yeah, definitely. And so, Ros, just to finish off, do you want to just tell us a little bit more about your book and where people can...
Thank you. Okay, so this is my book. It's called Emotional Sobriety. It's on Amazon, or if you connect with me, you can get it on my website. So what I've done with this book is I've talked about codependency and addiction, and I've put it into 10 chapters, how it affects all areas of our lives. So one's family, one's work. What about work addiction? Yep. You know, what about working 80 hours a week? So then you're eating, you know, bad foods, you're getting fat, you're not exercising. So that's where it kind of comes into this topic. So I've got vocational, I've got financial. We go and borrow money, or we want a new car or a new house because we think that's what will give it to us. Nothing wrong with those things, but it's the motive from what we're doing it. So I've put it into 10 chapters of the different areas. It's more like a workbook. It's not just all about me, and it's asking questions for realizations for that person. So please feel free to contact me via some way. I have a Facebook page called Power of No, and that's saying no to things that aren't serving us. I have Rosalind Saunders' Facebook page, and I have another Facebook page on relationship addiction. As you said, there's many, many people in relationships that are just going, oh, well, this will be okay. So they start eating or looking out, you know, they start doing things that aren't helpful to them. And what was I just going to say about, oh, that doesn't have to be just a significant other. I've had codependent relationships with girlfriends, with children, mothers and children, or grandparents. There can be a lot of codependency in that as well.
Yep, and even your pet.
Pet? Yeah, well, any strength across the line turns into a weakness. So when I say to my people, stay in your own paddock. You know, we want to go and fix or give, or, you know, to others, or we're all very good at knowing what's great, what other people should be doing in their lives.
Yeah,
so you often have people have got wobbly, my coaching clients, and they'll say, oh, this, and I say, did you get out of your paddock? Yes. You know, back in your paddock, you can only do with yourself, and but it takes a lot to withdraw from that because they're addicted to fixing, and that is very disguised when it comes to your children. Oh, but I'm their mother. So I've had some big lessons with that, with my children being in addiction. What a gift! I couldn't control them. I didn't see them.
No.
So I had to work on myself, my feelings, my fears, that I would plan their funerals, that the policeman would knock on the door, we found your child in the gutter. I've had years of that. And I couldn't go out there and drag them off the streets. And I tried it many times, put them in rehab. The next day they're gone. So that's the gift, the beautiful gift of my codependency and addiction is the gifts I've got out of it, because I couldn't go out there and do that. But you can cross addict. So therefore you can actually, if you haven't got my children around, I could become codependent with a girlfriend or with a work, or codependent with the boss. People pleasing, the dis-ease to please.
Yeah. Yeah, people pleasing. That's a big one.
Because we're not valued in ourselves. We're not happy with ourselves and feeling valued. So that's what I do with my clients. Build it, build it. I'm about sustainable recovery, not quick fixes. Even personal development. I was going off to all the personal development courses. You know, a weekend, $3,000. This will fix it. I was looking for the silver bullet. That didn't work. No. Thank goodness they didn't work.
Yeah.
I think you keep getting diminished if you're aware and want to clean up your life. You keep getting diminished so that you have to keep coming back into your paddock and looking at that and get support. No one in the history of any addiction has done it on their own. People go, well, I know what to do. We all know what to eat. We all know that we should exercise every day, but having support, having a coach or a counselor or someone to hold you accountable. So I'm supportive of my counselling, but I'm very firm.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, what you said is exactly right. They say, you know, to have success with weight management or weight loss, if someone's been struggling, they definitely need that support system around them and someone there to kind of guide them and, you know, that can share their feelings and emotions.
That's right. And someone to ring when they're desperate, that they don't feel judged. Yes, this is, you know, and okay, so what's the next thing we could do? What do you need to do? I call it, with my clients, I call it, if you're very emotional and you're not going to grab the cake or the heroin needle or the boo or the bottle, you've got to sit with those emotions. So I say, put yourself in emotional intensive care unit. 90, I don't know, you'd probably have the statistics. Most sicknesses are emotional. Yeah. And even if you do break your leg, you think, well, that's not emotional. You go to hospital, so that brings up fears about, I'm not working. See how it comes back to your emotions again?
Yeah, definitely.
I talk about emotional intensive care unit. If we had an accident, we'd be put in an emotional intensive care unit, but people will not take the time to look after themselves and respect it. And yet we are emotional beings. That's how we live.
Yeah, definitely. We are emotional beings.
Yes. Yeah.
So, well, that was great. I think we might wrap up there. Was there any last comments you wanted to add into the interview?
No, please feel free if anybody would like to have a chat. I'm now also working with the Australian Anti-Ice campaign because I've had children. So, you know, I have mothers ringing me and I know what they're feeling. I know what it's like. So if anybody would like to have a chat, but as hard as it is, start to change your perception from what you're doing as I'm just overweight to, let's get honest, maybe I'm a food addict and what could I do with that? That at least starts.
The thinking.
Other thing, yes. And if you got my book, because this is about the whole person, if you got my book, you would see how it links to, you know, spending money on food that you haven't got, or getting into relationships that, you know, you're doing it for a quick fix and it costs you. So that would be my thing, is get really honest.
Yeah, fantastic. Great. Well, great last thought there for the interview, and I hope everyone has a great weekend. I want to thank you very much for doing the interview with us today, and I'm sure people got a lot out of it. It was wonderful.
Thank you, Katie.
Thanks a lot. Bye.